Well, hello, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand, of course, in for Todd this week. And man, did it rain last night. I live on the top floor of an apartment building in Clayton Park, and a few years back, our landlord installed one of those metal roofs on, you know what I'm talking about, right? So let me tell you, when it rains as hard as it did last night, not only does it make noise, and to be fair, it's not bad because the insulation's good and the sound deadening and things, but the water that runs off that roof when it rains as hard as it did last night, it's like a rushing river, and it hits my patio. So anyway, I know there's a lot of us out there that are on not necessarily on municipal water, on groundwater, on a well, and I know that having a little bit of extra water into the ground aquifers, as they're called, as we head into the fall, into the winter. It's putting some people at ease. So the more rain, the better, I guess. And I think we're going to see that for most of the day today. We're looking at a bit of a washout, but I think we kind of need it, right? And, of course, we will keep an eye on what's happening down in Florida as they prepare for dealing with Hurricane Milton. Boy, you know, we can certainly feel their pain down there from here. And we will keep you up to date on that monster storm that's supposed to hit. Could be the Tampa area as early as Wednesday evening, so that's tomorrow evening. Speaking of winter, there's still a few days left to enter our draw for a chance to get away from it all this year with a vacation. Not just any vacation, but an all-inclusive one to Cuba. Our friends at Sunwing whisking you away to Angasano Caro Santa Maria to bury your feet into the sand. Doesn't that feel good right about now? Entering's easy. Just log on to our website, halifax.citynews.ca/contests, and follow the links, and good luck. And, yeah, as I've been saying, I'm pretty jealous. Thanks to Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass, who's always is keeping things in order here on a busy Tuesday. And thanks to Steve Murphy, who sat in yesterday, and Mayor Savage for joining us for half an hour before he bids his fond farewell to the big chair there at City Hall. A huge jump in diesel prices last night. It's 9 cents a liter it went up. It's interesting, right? Something we might want to talk about in the open hour at 11 o'clock today. It seems that when there's things like potential issues with Iran and big storms in the Gulf, that the diesel prices and the gasoline prices, they go up pretty quick, right? 9 cents a liter is a pretty significant drop. But it seems that when things are quiet, and a bit of a long time for those prices to fall, right? Maybe that's something you want to talk about in the open hour. Also, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. I'm going to put this question out there, and I don't know if our first guest wants to hear this, but there was a poll that was released earlier this week. I think it was Monday or maybe it was Friday, where they asked people to name some candidates in the upcoming election, and more than 50% of respondents couldn't name one of the 16 people that's on the ballot for this upcoming municipal election. That raises alarm bells with me, but you can't walk around anywhere, drive around anywhere, go anywhere in the city without seeing these god-awful election signs that are stuck on the side of the road, and people can't name a candidate. So that to me feels like that there's a level of disengagement out there. I don't know. Are people disengaged? That's the question I'm going to put to you in the open hour after 11 o'clock today. How do we get people engaged in these election processes? Or is it just too far gone? I'm curious to hear what your answer to that is. And all of that being said, voting for the municipal election begins today. And I'm sure there's questions about it, so we're going to take it right to the source and welcome into the program today. Returning Officer Ian McLean's in the studio. Good morning.
Morning. Thanks so much for having me on.
I guess let's start there with what's happening today. We've gone through the process. We've seen the lists narrowed down, and we know who's we're supposed to know who's on the ballot. But now this is where the rubber kind of hits the road today, and that's the first kind of phase of the way that we are able to mark our ballots, and that is the telephone and the e-voting. Ian, tell me a little bit about how this works and how somebody can participate at this juncture in the election cycle.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on. We're very excited today. We started off our alternative voting period at 8 o'clock this morning. So we have votes coming in. We're seeing them coming in across the HRM. But every resident in the HRM should have received a voter PIN card in the mail over the past few days, or they'll be receiving it over the next couple of days. That includes all the information, the website, the PIN, all the information that people need to go and cast their vote alternatively for the election. Election day is October 19th, but people can vote at any point in time they want to with that PIN up until the 16th.
So I got the card in the mail or the letter in the mail. How do I do it? Is there a website that I go to and there's obviously a phone number and then you get prompted to punch those numbers in and then you go from there?
That's exactly it. There's a few additional security parameters that we go through. I mean, obviously it's an election, so we want to make sure that that's all done properly. But it is fairly intuitive. I've had phone calls from people that have gone through it, and it sounds like if you have that letter, have that address, it's pretty simple. But you need to have that letter. So if you don't have it, we are encouraging anybody to go to the website, halifax.ca/election, or to call our office at 492-VOTE, and we can have our agents or anybody resubmit that PIN to you. Make sure you have all the information to be able to vote confidently.
What do I need if I didn't get that letter and I want to get that PIN number? Do I have to have like some form of ID, or how does that work?
You have to call into our call center and chat with one of our agents, and they have a few steps that they have to go through to provide that PIN to you. That is the really fun, good part about this election. We have a very, very great voters list from the province of Nova Scotia, so it is all done very, very organically, but also very secure. So we want to make sure that people know they should have received that PIN letter, but call us. We'll walk you through the process and get it to you as quick as we can.
Once you got that PIN and you're into the system, minute and a half?
Pretty seamlessly. I think it very much depends on how much time people want to be able to take to cast their ballot. We want to make sure that people have the chance to go there and do it intuitively. We want to make sure that people finish the voting process, but there's no time limit on it. We want to make sure people have that comfort level, but it is a fairly quick process. It should not take much time.
What happens once I've cast my ballot? If I cast it electronically, where does it go? And because there are obviously people raise concerns about the security of these ballots. What kind of steps do you take to secure these ballots?
Well, we're very lucky. We have some very trusted, very extremely experienced election providers that we work with that have some very in-depth security parameters on their end to ensure the vote is secure. I don't even know what the votes are up until the election day and until we actually release those votes. So they are kept very secret. And then they're released on the 19th. So this isn't going to be something where people are going to see results coming in throughout the election voting process. No results will be available until the 19th, when we'll make them available for everybody publicly at halifax.ca/election.
So this is the first phase, and it kicked off this morning. The second phase is the advance poll, the traditional advance poll that we're used to. What we're used to. I know we've been doing this for the last couple of elections, but that is the way that we traditionally voted in advance, and that's the in-person advance poll.
Now, the thing that we're excited about for the advance opportunities this time is that we are going to be using the alternative voting at advance. So there will not be any paper ballots at the advance voting. That will only be on election day. So when you come into the advance vote, bring your PIN, or we can help look up your PIN for you. But we'll have kiosks and we'll have voter workers there to help people vote in the alternative voting.
So it's more designed for people that maybe don't have access to a computer or a phone to be able to vote.
Yeah, or if people may not be on the voters list, or they cannot find that PIN, we're really setting it up to be a one-stop shop to help people in that voting process.
And then that happens on the...
Two opportunities. So on October 12th, so if you're interested in spending some of your Thanksgiving weekend with us, you're welcome to come join us at any of our locations. And then we also do have it on the 15th as well.
And then the big day, the day that we traditionally call Election Day, and that's the 19th. Mm-hmm. I do believe the polls open at 8 o'clock in the morning. They're closed at 7. Ian, tell me a little bit about what that experience is going to look like for people that want to do it old school and go and mark a ballot.
So, again, the 19th, you do have the opportunity to come and cast your ballot on Election Day. It is the only opportunity that we will have paper ballots in this election, and we are hoping to move to the all-alternative election moving forward. But that will be, there's 110 voting stations across the HRM. We've done everything we can to provide accessible voting locations, but people can come in. They do not need to bring identification. They can come in and they can cast their ballot or be added to the voters list. There are a few forms or things that people have to figure out. You do have to deal with parking. It is a longer process, but it is available for anybody who's interested.
Is there a designated polling number? Like, do you have a poll that's designated for you, or can you go to any poll, or how does that work?
So for the advanced voting opportunities, you can go to any poll within your district, but for Election Day, you must go to your designated voting station. We do not have a real-time poll book on Election Day, so for the voters list, we have to have people going to their designated sites, which is why we are encouraging anybody and everybody to vote in the alternative voting period that goes from now until 7 p.m. on October 16th.
if I wanted to find where my polling station is for the 19th, how do I do that?
So there's a few things that I would encourage people to do. Halifax.ca/election has all the information. That's the source of truth for everything. There's a couple things we would encourage people to look up. First off, there was a major district boundary review that happened in 2020 that adjusted where some people are represented within the HRM, and every district changed. So if you have any questions, go to our website, do the lookup tool to see what district you're in. We also have a tool that allows you to look up your voting station and send you exactly where you need to go on election day, and try to put as much information in there for people so they can be aware of any of the accessibility provisions.
So you plug in your address kind of thing, and it tells you what number it is and what district you're in.
Exactly. And then again, if people want to have that conversation part of this, they can always call into the call center as well, and we can do that for them too.
On the 19th, polls, as I mentioned, are open from 8 until 7. Then the counting begins, so to speak. How are people going to be able, other than to listening to the Todd Veinotte show on Saturday night, are they going to be able to access the results for the election?
We will be releasing results on halifax.ca/election on election night. I want to be clear with everybody. The polls close at 7. You won't be successful if you're looking at 7:05 for some results. It does take us a little bit of time, but throughout that evening, we will make sure that the results are posted. And then we're also going to be doing a lot of publicity and notification throughout the next couple of weeks to encourage people to vote. We have historically low voter turnouts in municipal elections. We're doing everything we can within the budgets we have to promote the opportunity to vote, and we really want to encourage everybody to participate in the voting process. And then please come and check the website. We'll be posting the results as soon as we have them available.
And then once those results are certified, then there's the next council takes over in November, right? Is that the way that works?
Yeah, there's quite. So I get asked quite often what we do for the election office every other year of the year, every not 4 years. We have a significant process, potential recounts. There's a long legislative process. But the official swearing-in ceremony for the new council will happen in early November, and then that new council will lead and set the direction and the policy direction for the HRM for the next 4 years.
And then the returning office takes a long vacation.
Theoretically, there will be some sleep happening in December, we hope.
Fair enough. Ian, again, let's we're almost out of time, run this down. Where's the best place for somebody that wants to vote and maybe has a bunch of questions? Is the website the best place to go?
Yeah, and to the way we started our conversation, we've actually posted all of the information we've received from candidates for their website, some of their social media. We've actually posted pictures of the candidates on halifax.ca/election. That website has all the information as far as phone numbers, emails, any contact points to get a hold of us, and also where we're doing all the promotion for election opportunities, the district boundary lookup, the voting station lookup. And then what everybody is hopefully excited for is on the 19th is where we'll post the results and see where this community is going to go for the next few years.
Ian, I know you're an extremely busy man, and I appreciate you spending some time with us and answering some of our questions today.
Appreciate it so much. Everybody, just want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to participate in the democracy of the community.
Get out and vote. It's that simple. Returning Officer Ian McLean, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to take our first break here on the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Allstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Allstrand. Hope those questions that you had about voting were answered with our first guest. I know that it's for some it's new, and we have an opportunity to do these e-ballots and to use the phone voting. A couple of different opportunities out there, so there's really no excuse to not vote in this election because the people that put these things on are making it as easy as possible. I think, and that's just my opinion, for you to go and mark the ballot. I know. We had Vanessa went through it this morning, said it only took her like a minute and a half or 2 minutes to do, so it's really that easy. We're going to continue our focus on the municipal election with our next guest as these elections come across Nova Scotia and here in HRM as they heat up. Small business putting forward their priorities for candidates for councillor and mayor across the province. Senior policy analyst for the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, Duncan Robertson, is our guest this morning. Duncan, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I guess the first question is, we've had many council candidates, particularly here in HRM, in the studio on the phone. I've been asking them all of the questions, but that's more from a resident's perspective, right? What is the I guess the number one top agenda item for small business that they'd like to hear from council candidates and candidates for mayor in this election?
Well, I'm fairly certain their top concern is also the top concern of residents, which is, of course, property taxes and that taxation. Particularly when we look to small businesses, 7 in 10 say that they don't see good value for money for the property taxes they pay. But they do pay, in terms of the tax rate itself, far higher than residents as well. Depending on where they are in the municipality, they're either paying, 4 times or 5.5 times a higher tax rate than residents. So, of course, we want to see the tax rate itself brought down. Now, we're not saying increase taxes for residents by any means, but just practice some conscious spending, making sure that they're that the next council and mayor are really auditing what they're spending on, ensuring that they're getting good value for money, and really providing some support to small businesses at the same time.
Nobody likes taxes, right? If you ask 10 out of 10 people would say no, I don't like them. There's too much tax, but the value for taxes is I think is where we need to sort of narrow in on here, because business owners, taxes are a cost of doing business. Everybody has to pay tax, but not seeing a return on that has to be a sore point for business owners.
Absolutely. Life, death, and taxes, right? That's always going to be there. It's always going to be around. But that value for money piece is really important, making sure, small businesses want to see that there's some investment going into helping them when they're, facing impacts from construction projects, that, perhaps the city could eliminate sidewalk patio fees, like finding ways to ensure that, while they're, giving some money to the city, that they're getting some services back and seeing good services in terms of service standards and customer service as well at the same time.
Construction. Yeah, I don't think that businesses are alone in that one, driving home in it every day. But I would imagine, particularly in places like downtown Halifax, where that big Cogswell interchange project is underway, and there's some other big projects that are underway or soon to be underway, Almond Street with bike lanes, those kind of things. How big an impact does that have on business, particularly in places like downtown Halifax?
Well, not just in Halifax, but across Canada, close to 3/4 of small businesses say that they're being impacted by construction over the past 5 years. 3/4 again saying that's happened more than once. So it's ongoing issues, and we have been able to put a dollar value to that. We estimate that it costs over 5 years the average business around $53,000, which is significant when you think of the realities facing small businesses, particularly those impacted by construction, are often on Main Street, so retail, hospitality. So we really want to see the municipality and the province partner in providing construction mitigation funding for small businesses. We see cities like Montreal, Quebec City bring in some targeted support to small businesses impacted by construction. And we think this is a good step. We've talked to plenty of candidates about it. We've heard some support in private on that. So we just want to see the next council really make that a priority as well, because it does have a dollar value impact to small businesses.
Duncan, what do you say to the person in the car right now that's impacted by that construction and having to wait an extra 20 minutes in traffic because of some paving being done on the Bedford Highway or whatever else, that won't get a tax break for that? Why should business get a tax break rather than everybody get some sort of construction relief program?
Yeah, well, look, for so many small business owners, their business is, it's their retirement fund. It's what they live off of. It has a huge impact on their life. And really, when small businesses are being impacted at a no fault of their own with, its impact on their living, it's important that that the city provides some kind of, direct support for that. A small business owner can't work from home on many occasions. If you're owning a small business in hospitality or a restaurant or a cafe, you can't work from home. So you have to go into business. And if that business is being impacted, well, it's a significant impact on your life.
Also, I hear from business owners on this show a lot when they're trying to do something, either open or expand or put up a patio. There's a mammoth amount, a mountain of red tape for them to go through, just the processes and the permits and everything else. Is that something that's been identified in your conversations with business owners ahead of this election?
Yeah, it's always a concern at every order of government. We as an organization have a week, focused solely on Red Tape Awareness Week, which happens at the end of January this year. But look, when we look at the municipal side of things, a third of small businesses cite red tape as an issue on the municipal side of things to their business. Things like, making sure that there's service standards, that there's online systems in place. But particularly when we look at Halifax, they did have a portal in which a small business owner, a resident, could go in and cite instances of red tape and where they think it should eliminate or where it should be eliminated. But when we look over the past year, they took that away. So that's something we want to see brought back, because it's important for the next council and mayor to really be actively following the red tape file. And this is one tool that we think the city should bring back to track that.
I mentioned patios, and I know that that's something that you've been on the show talking about before. Is there any support out there? You don't necessarily have to name a candidate, but is it something that's on the radar of candidates, particularly that are representing districts or mayors in areas where patios are set up? What are you hearing from them?
Yes, well, again, not naming candidates, but during the chamber debate, one candidate did cite that he wanted to eliminate sidewalk patio fees. So this isn't just a pie-in-the-sky idea. Councillors are taking this policy and running with it. It's a small policy in terms of the cost to the municipality, but it can provide some support to sector, the hospitality industry, which was hit, the hardest during the pandemic. And it also shows a difference in kind of mindset. Rather than thinking, why don't we charge this to small businesses? I'm thinking rather, why should we charge this to small businesses? Is there a justification for this? And if it's only a small amount going into municipal coffers, but it does have a big impact on small businesses, considering cutting that is important. And we're glad to see councillors really, again, take that policy and run with it, because we do want to see it brought forward quickly in the next iteration of council.
Duncan Robertson's a senior policy analyst with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Duncan, we've had a number of conversations from a number of different angles here on the program about theft and shoplifting and the frustration that is happening out there. Police say, they're trying to fix it. The business owners are saying, well, they're not getting the response that they want. What, if anything, can a municipal government do to help business owners deal with a problem that is growing, it seems, weekly?
It is definitely growing, particularly when we think of shoplifting. Nova Scotia was cited as having the highest shoplifting rate in the country, according to StatsCan. We do want to see council focus on that. We've seen some business groups ask for more boots on the ground in terms of policing, which I get is a good idea for sure. And again, 7 in 10 small businesses in Atlantic Canada have cited an increase in crime in their communities. Concerningly, half have cited that they've been directly impacted, like you said, shoplifting, but also vandalism. So making sure that, one, there's more boots on the ground, but also considering some kind of support for small businesses who want to invest more in security, like cameras, things like that, is important. Often small businesses are looking to now, investing more in security. So it could be between, hiring additional, cashier register, or a cashier rather, yep. Or a security guard, which again, if you're investing in security guard, it's necessary, but it's impacting your productivity as a small business.
Is that something that should fall at the municipal level, or should that fall at the provincial level, or should be a combination of both?
Well, I think it's on all orders of government. We have seen some provinces like BC step up and provide, $1,000 for small businesses looking to invest in increasing their security. But I think, look, as a municipality, it's important to, again, they have a big role to play in terms of policing, but also considering some kind of rebate as well with the province. It'd be great to see a partnership there, and something that we'd like to see. We're asking for construction mitigation, but, it's important too for crime mitigation too, is something that all orders of government should be focused on.
Duncan, we're out of time. I appreciate yours.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you very much.
That is Duncan Robertson, Senior Policy Analyst with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. We're going to stop down for the news. Shelley's going to update us on what's going on in the world. And when we come back, we'll continue our look at municipal candidates in this upcoming election. Nicole Johnson from District 4, Cole Harbour, Preston, Westfall, Cherrybrook will be in our studio. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Hope you're having a fantastic Tuesday. As I mentioned before the break, we're going to continue our look and our chats about the upcoming municipal election, which is not that far away. In fact, in case you missed our first guest, you can vote today. It begins today. So if you've made your decision and you're ready to go, why not just log on or give them a call? Knock that off your list, and then you can go about your business knowing that you did your part in our democracy, that is the municipal election here in HRM. I'll come off of my soapbox now. Very pleased to welcome into the show as we continue our look at and chat with candidates that have taken the time out of their lives to run for public office, and we're pleased to welcome into the studio this morning, running in District Number 4, and I have to run all of these down because these have all changed since the last election. District 4, Cole Harbour, Preston, Westfall, Cherrybrook. Nicole Johnson, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Todd, for having me.
I guess let's. The first question I've been asking people that have been sitting in that chair is why now? Why did you decide that this was an opportunity for you to get back out there and run for public office?
Well, thank you so much for that question. I think it's always been my intent to run. We ran second time. Well, this will be the second time coming around, but I ran last election for municipal in District 2 and had a wonderful time with that. And I've been building upon that for the last 4 years, doing community building, developing relationships that are, directly connected to our district and working alongside folks. But stepping up now is because mainly for the lack of leadership and representation we have currently. And been speaking to people at the door, the constituents, and hearing their pain points. They don't feel heard, they don't feel represented, and they definitely don't feel like they have a voice at council pushing for their needs and making sure that they are looked after in the way of you. We elected you to do a job, and we need you to do that job. Nicole,
that communication piece I've heard an awful lot going through the last 4 or 5 weeks that we've been doing this. A lot of people that are sitting in that chair have identified that as one of the big problems with the current council. I guess, what is the solution to that? How do you fix the communication problem?
Communication is key. If I've learned nothing from working as a community specialist at the Halifax Public Library, communication is key. We know that the system in our structure of librarians is that we work together, right? There's a whole team of us. Somebody can take the lead, but you still have to trickle that information down so everybody's on board. And I think for community to know what's going on in their district and in their neighborhood specifically, that comes from the head. And if you know information, share it with them and let them then decide what's beneficial or not, and then develop that dialogue. Because if we're unaware of what's happening and we have to keep, trying to find ways to survive within the means of what we can afford, it's challenging and it's stressful and it's hard and it doesn't make anybody pleasant to deal with at all. And they will want demand, and I've seen them at city halls putting demands for questions to their counselor, right? Answer us. You have to answer to us because we elected you in to do a job. So please do that job. Yeah.
You also mentioned transparency is part and parcel with that. Tell me a little bit about what people are telling you about how transparent City Hall is.
Well, I can be frank, not at all. And I think that's an issue because, just be honest with people and let people know, hey, listen, this is what I know. Right? Just keep them involved and not wait until something's been done and sealed and signed off on, but walk them through the process. Hold their hand if you need to, because at least they know that you're thinking about them and you're including them and you're reporting back. That always works, right? It's just a way of life, being open and transparent as to this is what's happening, and letting people decide for themselves, based on that information that, well, this is what's happening, and so how are we going to fix that, and what do you want me to do about that when I take it back to the council?
Another one of the big issues, and I'm certain that you've been hearing this on the doorsteps, is the current affordability issue in HRM, and part and parcel to that the homeless issue as well. Mm-hmm. I guess the first question for me to you is, are you happy with the way that the current HRM council or the current administration has been dealing with the homelessness problem with the use of encampments, or is there a better solution for that?
If I could be honest, and I'll speak from a voice of community, it's never nice to see people in a safe place without a roof over their head. It's just never nice. Homelessness and housing issues is a big problem in the city, right? It's just not one designated, it's a problem. And what I've noticed in District 4 is that we have encampments, but we also have people who are couch surfing, right, in other communities and living with aunties and uncles just to be safe and have ends meet. or they just can't afford, right, to live. If you're making $1,800 and your expenses are $2,000, just for,
Yep.
numbers sake, that doesn't make sense. The math doesn't math, right?
Right.
So finding ways to help people to be in affordable, safe homes and living spaces is something that should be a priority on our agenda, because we're coming up to a season change, winter. We're in the fall. The weather's nice, but what are we going to do in a couple of months, right? Do we forget that they're out there? So we find ways. If this was your child or your auntie or somebody, you would move whatever you need to move, make whatever case you need to make sure that this is being dealt with, and not wait till it keeps coming to you. Get ahead of it, right? So that's what I would say. It's just it pains me to see that people are at a disposition when it comes to housing.
We hear all the time when we talk about housing that it's a provincial issue, and the province needs to deal with this. The relationship, even though the mayor yesterday said the relationship with the province is good, I'm going to suggest the relationship with the province on this, particularly this file, is strained. I'll say to be political on it. How do we improve that? And should HRM as a council play a stronger role in social and community housing?
I think the voice needs to be heard. I think, if you have ideas and solutions to add to what needs to be happening, voice those. There's not a real strong solution. You just got to keep finding ones that actually will work and be effective. When we're building these homes, and you can see, because driving up here, I see there's a lot of development, but my thought is, who's affording to live there? You can just see the building and see what amenities will be inside, but who can afford to live there, right? And if we keep building our neighborhoods and communities and buildings that doesn't allow us to be in community, whether we can wave to our neighbor from across the street, whether we can go and help them mow their lawn, that's not how we build communities, by building these big infrastructures and keeping us in silos and separate from each other. I grew up knowing our neighbors. I could run across the street and play with my cousins or new people that's coming into the community. It's just finding ways, solutions, and keep working together. All levels of government needs to work together. Yes, it's a provincial issue, but it seems to be trickling down to municipal, right? And we all have to deal with it, because we all have somebody right on our doorstep having to be without a home, a safe home.
Nicole Johnson is a candidate in District 4. I obviously take a lot of calls from people in the Cole Harbour and Preston and Cherrybrook areas, and I hear that transit is a major issue there. Is there a solution? Can we fix transit for HRM?
Transit is a huge pain point for District 4, right from Preston, with lack of routes, just one route to be exact. And speaking, I did some school visits, and no, these students are not of voting age, but their voices still matter. And so I wanted to hear from them as to what that looks like. I already know what, those who are working feel. They're tired of waiting, right? They're waiting for hours, and there's one route, one bus that takes them where they need to go. And if they miss that bus, there's not a real connecting link to get them to the next bus so they can get home on time and prepare their supper. But lack of transit, yeah, that needs to be looked at. Absolutely. It needs to be looked at for the reasons that people are working. They need to get to their jobs on time. And it's really that simple. People need to get to where they're going without interruption. And the big thing is the lack of drivers. If there's no drivers,
just this morning they canceled ferries because there's nobody to drive them.
So nobody's there to run these buses, right? There's always going to be an issue of transit, right? There's a high turnover over that. And so how do we fix that? How do we turn people on to applying for these jobs so that we can fill these positions and get more buses and get more routes out there?
Been a lot of talk about rapid transit and fixing things in the core. We heard an announcement earlier this year about a fast ferry from Bedford. Some candidates are talking about light rail into HRM, but all of these things come with a pretty significant cost attached.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Do you think we have enough infrastructure now, or do we need to add to help to improve transit here?
I don't know if the infrastructure is there enough. Definitely not when it comes to water and sewer. So that's going to be an issue. But in terms of building upon something, we would really have to look at that. And I think there needs to be more than one voice or enough voices at the table who can make sound decisions, really look at it and revisit what's not working and and make it work so that it can be the most effective for everybody's district, because it just doesn't affect one district, it affects everybody who's like whether you're driving in a vehicle or on a bus.
No,
right?
it's the same. Everybody gets stuck in traffic, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
District 4 obviously is a growing district.
It is.
There's a lot of development going on. Are we doing development right? Are we doing it the right way outside of the peninsula in the edges of HRM?
Well, from what I understand from the conversations I've had, yes and no. Some people, well, we can't please everybody, but for those who are in the city, potentially there's some easement of getting around or seeing development. But for the Prestons, their community looks the same before my generation, and it should never be. There should be progression. But progression should only happen when that particular neighborhood or community is ready for it. And we even though we want to be future focused, it still has to make sense. It still has to fit for what the constituents are ready for. And sometimes we're not, but we're forced upon to do things or pay for things that we didn't ask for or agreed upon.
Nicole, we're just about out of time. How can we find out more about you? And I know we're talking about the socials before we came in, so you have social media and all that stuff?
Yes, I do. So I have a Facebook page because we're allowing some of our young folks to kind of take the lead on that and work with me on that. And again, that's another way to get them involved. But we have a Facebook page, Vote to Elect Nicole Johnson, and you'll find, more information about me as a person and as a candidate, and also, some of the platform that we're pushing, our message that we're pushing, wanting to connect our communities and creating opportunities for everybody, to empower them, to support them, and to, encourage them to stay in their communities, right? To get involved, to be a part of communities and boards that will help them, even with volunteerism, to be a part and take an investment into the community. So, and I think that's one way that we can make this all go around and share the information and share the wealth of who we are as District 4.
Nicole, good for you for engaging the youth, because they're the next generation of voters, right?
Yeah.
And great interview, and good luck in the upcoming election.
Thank you. Please remember to vote.
That is Nicole Johnson, District 4. Stopping down, we're going to take another break here, and when we come back, the Supreme Court dismisses illegal action on Canada's air passenger protections around international flights. Gabor Lukács will be your guest. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Dan Alstrand along with you here on a rather dark and dreary, I guess, Tuesday. But, like I said earlier, we need the rain. And if there's anything that's happened over the last 4 or 5 weeks that we've been doing this and interviewing candidates for council, it's like a breath of fresh air when I talk to people, and I hear some really great ideas. And there's a lot of energy, and everybody's just jazzed up, and everybody is they really want to make change and help, right? And maybe I'm a bit naive, and I know how it works, but it makes me feel good just to hear all of these people with all of these great ideas that really want to make a change in their community. And I think we should reward that by going to the polls, right? Hearing that, that half of you don't even know who the 16 mayor candidates, one of the 16 mayor candidates. That's scary to me. And that's something that we're going to open up the phone lines after 11 o'clock on to talk about when it comes to the municipal election. New poll that was released, I think it was yesterday or it was maybe Friday, saying that, of the 16 or the I think it was 200 and some odd or 300 people that they had interviewed on the phone couldn't identify one of the candidates, and that just really is shocking to me. Anyway, moving on to our next guest in a victory. This on our website, by the way, City News or halifax.citynews.ca. And a victory for air travelers. Supreme Court of Canada upheld rules that bolster compensation for passengers subjected to delays and damaged luggage on international flights. On Friday, the country's highest court unanimously dismissed an appeal by a group of airlines that challenged Canada's passenger rights charter. Air Canada, Porter, and 16 foreign appellates argued that air passenger protection regulations launched back in 2019 violated global standards and should be rendered invalid for trips into the country. The Supreme Court disagreeing. And whenever we talk about passenger rights, there's really only one person that we talk to about it, and has been fighting this fight for a very long time, and he's on the phone with us this morning. Gabor, how are you? Gabor Lukacs is our guest.
Good morning. It's good to be with you.
I guess this is a pretty big victory, right?
It is a landmark decision that upholds consumer rights, recognizes consumer protection as an important objective, as an important legislative intent and government policy, and rejects the airline's argument that Canada signed away its right to establish consumer protection measures for passengers traveling to and from Canada.
Gabor, what does this mean? This decision from the Supreme Court of Canada now, what does this mean for passengers? Is this now enshrined in law?
This has been enshrined in law for the past 5 years. The airlines have been trying to overturn the law. The practical effect, however, is that airlines will no longer be able to use references to the Montreal Convention, the international treaty they have been arguing about, as an excuse for delay legal proceedings. And more importantly, this breathes new life into the initiative to revamp Canada's broken air passenger protection regime. Make no mistake, the APPR as it stands is a terrible regime that favors the airlines over consumers. It is full of loopholes, making it very difficult for passengers to enforce their rights, to even know whether they are owed compensation, and it creates a tremendous burden for decision makers, small claim court judges, to sift through mountains of evidence to decide whether compensation is or isn't owed. Canada should, as we have always been saying, follow the European Union's gold standard in passenger protection, in consumer protection. Unfortunately, government has not been listening so far. What we heard so far are many promises. And last year, they said they are going to revamp the APPR. There was a consultation last August, but so far, no draft regulations have been published.
Gabor, does this new judgment from the Supreme Court give you and the folks working on this more ammunition now to get that revamp done?
I do believe so, yes. This judgment reinforces the importance of consumer protection, reinforces the idea that airlines, whether Canadian or foreign, that come to Canada and want access to Canadian market, to Canadian passengers, must obey Canadian law and pay for its cost in terms of compensating passengers. It also takes away any kind of excuse the government might be able to make as to why they are not going to make regulations. Incidentally, it may also provide more support for enacting stronger protection for passengers with disabilities traveling internationally. One of the big issues is the so-called one person, one fare rule, which requires airlines, at least on domestic flights, to provide 2 seats to passengers if they need it due to their disability. For example, they may need an attendant or a service dog, or they may be so large that they need 2 seats for their body. In any of those cases, airlines would have to provide 2 seats for just the price of 1 passenger. But this rule, at the airline's request, has been limited to flights within Canada, which is a serious concern from a human rights perspective. The airlines have, just like as in the APPR's case, arguing that it's not possible to extend it to international flights because it's against international law. So I would hope that as an additional benefit, this ruling is also going to pave way to better protection of passengers with disabilities on international flights.
Gabor, you mentioned that there was a consultation earlier this summer on this revamp, but nothing from government yet. We are on the precipice, it seems, of a federal election very soon. Is there danger that that will set everything back if we do change government in Canada?
This consultation happened actually last year in 2023, okay. And the current government has not been acting on that file. Certainly, I do hope there will be an election very soon because it's quite clear that Canadians are not happy with the current government. The majority of Canadians are not. I, at the same time, would very much like to hear from the other side of the aisle, from the Conservative Party of Canada, what their policies would be, how they are proposing to fix Canada's broken passenger protection regime. What is clear that the clock cannot be turned back. We do have now broken passenger protection regulations, but we cannot just toss it away. What we need to do is to bring it in line with the European Union's gold standard. It would be a big loss if they didn't do it, or if they try to do away with it. And I hope that will not be the case. What I would encourage everyone, all listeners, is to start asking their federal members of parliament and candidates for the next federal elections what their policies are going to be on passenger protection. What do they want to do to resolve what is obviously a problem for an entire Canada? And competition is not going to resolve alone the problem that airlines doing a race to the bottom creates, and airlines disobeying the law creates.
Gabor, I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
That is passenger rights advocate Gabor Lukács. I'm going to stop down and take a break for the news. Shelley's going to update us on what's going on in the world. And when we come back, we're going to throw open those telephone lines. The number is 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Dan Ahlstrand along with you on a Tuesday morning. It's just after 11 o'clock. That means it's time to throw open those telephone lines. The number is 902-405-6000. Excuse me, 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Your chance to talk about whatever it is on your mind. I have a couple of polls that I'd like to kick off the open hour with, and one of them is just hot off the presses. The Halifax Chamber of Commerce has released its third in a series of polls that asking the question, the most preferable candidate for mayor of Halifax. And Andy Fillmore still at the top of that list. But the real news nugget here is that Mr. Fillmore seems to be losing support as we get closer to Election Day. This the third of a series of three polls. Fillmore in August was at 23% support. Then in September on the 17th to the 19th was at 29% support. And most recently, this poll conducted on between the 1st and the 3rd of October, now at 24% support. Second place, Wayne Mason started the polling in August at 9%, increased that to 13% in September, and in this most recent polling up to 19%. So we're within 6 points of one another. This becoming essentially a two, maybe three-horse race, as it's kind of always been. The third-place candidate, Pam Lovelace, was at 4% in August, up to 12% in September, and maintaining that 12% position in this latest poll released by the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. The polling done, by the way, by Narrative Research. Jim Hoskins was in fourth spot. He wasn't on the ballot in August, so he didn't get a number for him. Then in September, he was at 3%. He's up to 4% support. Everybody else is at 1% or less than 1% support on the list of 16. So that is the latest numbers that we have on the preference for mayor. But the poll that's concerning me the most, and we'll get to the phones in just a second, is a story that we ran yesterday that says a new poll looking at the upcoming municipal election in Halifax found that almost half of voters couldn't name any candidates running to be mayor. The poll from MQO Research surveyed 383 voters in HRM, found that 46% of respondents couldn't name a mayoral candidate, and 58% were undecided. Now, of those who made up their mind about who to vote for, former MP Andy Fillmore was the most popular choice, as I had just highlighted in that poll. the research company says the data suggests that name recognition is a primary driver of voter support. But the part about the whole thing that really is concerning to me is that 46% of the people that they talked to during this period of polling couldn't name one of 16 candidates that are on the ballot for the October 19th election for mayor. To me, that means that people are just not engaged in this campaign. And my question to you is, why? Why are people so turned off when it comes to voting, particularly at the municipal level? We had our conversation with the returning officer earlier in the program, and he said that we historically get low voter turnout for municipal elections in the high 30s or low 40s. Why is that? Why do people just not vote? I'm curious as to what your thoughts on that are. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. Rob's been waiting a long time. Let's get him on the air. Rob, how are you?
Hey, Dan. How you making out?
I'm well, sir.
So as far as Andy Fillmore, I don't believe, me personally, I would not support him. He was up there in Ottawa backing Trudeau, voting with Trudeau.
Okay.
Through all the bad decisions, the carbon tax, the irresponsible immigration, which is a big reason why we have a lot of housing problems in Halifax right now.
Okay.
The ethics breaches, the scandal. You look at what's going on now in the House of Commons. I just don't believe. I think there's got to be a better choice, and maybe it's one of the lesser known candidates. But and I'm still researching that. But no, definitely a no for me.
Rob, can I ask you a question, Rob?
Yeah.
You're familiar with how party politics in Ottawa works, right?
Yeah.
And that when you're elected as an MP, you do what you're told.
Hey, he still stood behind them. Even not one of them had the courage to stand up and say, hey, this is wrong. And that's how it works. Well, I guess you got to play that game. If you got to play that game, play that game.
Okay, fair. No, I'm just curious of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, and as far as people, why they're not, there are people occasionally they'll cross the floor.
And then they get fired. Right? Right. So then if you're a Liberal, and we'll use Andy as an example, and you stand up to the Prime Minister and you get fired, then can you represent the constituency?
Okay, but you ask him if he supported all the irresponsible immigration, the carbon tax, all this stuff, all these reasons why Trudeau's going to get voted out in the next election. If he supports all that,
okay.
He says, and he even in his commercial that you guys air,
yep.
He says, "Oh, it's such a great place, but we have more work to do." God, doesn't that sound familiar? Doesn't that sound like somebody else? We have more work to do. But Dan, most people, I don't think they get too wound up in municipal politics because I just think a lot of people, they just don't care.
And that's why I asked you the question about federal politics, Rob, because, when you're an elected MP or even an MLA, you get told what to do from the party brass, right? But a municipal politician doesn't. And you would think that because of that, the electorate would be more engaged with a municipal councillor than with somebody at the other levels.
Well, he's showing me that he doesn't align with my thoughts and my beliefs as to what this country needs. This country's suffering. This country's suffering big time under Justin Trudeau. And like I said, he did well. I'm sure he's got his gold-plated pension. I don't know. But for me personally, I would look at one of the lesser known people. I know there'd be quite a learning curve there, but I say let's give one of them a shot.
Rob, I appreciate your call.
Okay, take it easy.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000 is the number. 902-405-6000. We welcome Wayne to the show. Wayne, how are you?
Good day, sir. How are you?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
Well, it's this upcoming city election that's driving me crazy.
Okay, why?
There's a reason why. First of all, they had a vote. Todd mentioned something about a vote, or I can't remember if it was you, but they tallied up all the amount that it was going to cost to put this bike lanes in on University Avenue.
And the South End. Yep, $15 million.
Right. Now think about that, $15 million. We can build a pretty good apartment building for $15 and get the homeless off the streets. It's like their priorities are not in line. Yes, I would like to see bike lanes. Yes, I would like to see more people out riding bikes because I'm an ex-biker, pedal biker, cyclist. But let's get our priorities straight here. We got seniors trying to make a decision between food, the bills, my medication, etc. We got young kids going to school not properly dressed or not fed or abused, whatever, according to listen to all the news reports and that. We got people living on the streets that rent is so bad in the city now that I think it's outrageous. It just blows my mind. Thank God I live in my own home. So when they're sitting down there in City Hall in the council trying to make command decisions on we're going to fix a pothole or we're going to spend $15 million on a bike lane, and isn't it another $7 million for this special bridge they want to build down off the bridge, the old bridge down to Barrington Street?
I think that's already done. I think that's already built.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't notice it the last time I was down there, but I will take a look for it the next time. Well, how much did that cost us? I think the last report I heard on that from this show, it was going to be $7 million.
That number rings a bell, yep.
$15 million and $7 million. Can you imagine the land we can clear with that and the apartment buildings we can build with that to get the homeless off the street? Oh, my God. It just... when I think about my own bills and how I deal with my own income and my own lifestyle, what are they thinking down in City Hall? It's just money. Let's liquidate it. Let's get rid of it. It's just money. Well, it's not just money. It's hard-paying, tax-paying dollars. So anyway, I want to mention something about the election. Oh, that's the other thing I was going to mention about the election.
Sure, quickly, yep.
I would not rehire anybody that made that decision to spend that $15 million. Right now, I'm on the fence with Andy Fillmore and Jim Hawkins for mayor, and I think I'm going to vote this lady in here. Her last name is Steele.
Okay, you're in District 12.
Yes.
Okay.
Cheers, sir. Have a good day.
You too. 902-405-6000 is the number, and I just want to be fair as I can be, that City Council voted to move forward on that $15 million worth of bike lanes. They didn't actually write the check. But my point is that they could have stopped that $15 million in its tracks, right? There's still work to be done. The tender hasn't gone out, but they could have said, no, $15 million or whatever the number is, and I know that it's not $15 million because there's provincial money and everything else, but the provincial money and federal money is your money and my money too. But they could have stopped that bike lane in its tracks, and they chose to move forward on it and explore it further. So take that as you will. There's a few people on the line. We'll get to you right after the break. There are some open lines if you want to get in on the conversation. 902-405-6000 is the number. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Dan Olstrand along with you here on a Tuesday morning. The lines are open. There's a few spots available if you want to get into the conversation. The number is 902-405-6000. We welcome Michael to the program. Michael, I heard you on the Rob Snow Show yesterday.
Yeah, oh yeah. I like going searching around for different places where you can have different points of view and open up conversations. Yeah, I'm still getting the chuckle of them. In Halifax there, they got a municipal election going on, and you don't even know the candidates have it.
Isn't that just bizarre?
When ignorance is bliss, how many times did you hear me say it?
Right.
Or I said it to Rick Howe, I said it to Tom Young. When ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. An uneducated vote is a wasted vote, so it's just well for them not to vote. But thank God those two Swedes developed that pill to de-doctrinate people that can't change their mind or can't think beyond their nose. You know, until they get out of that Liberal and Tory clique, and that's what's happening in your municipal election here in Halifax. Guarantee you, Fillmore's winning her hands down. They stacked the deck. God knows. Matter of fact, I should apologize to those people that don't know those people that are running, because a lot of them are put on the ballot just so votes will go away from the front runner, which happens to be Fillmore, and he's going to win it, and the Liberals still control. It's just like the Savage era over again. Nothing changes. I used to joke with Rick Howe a while back there. We used to get a kick out of it. I used to say, Rick, you know what the only solution is? Bend them over and give it to them over the bearers.
Michael, I appreciate the call.
I'll leave you with that, buddy. I'll talk to you later.
902-405-6000. Been a while since Michael said that on the radio, hasn't it? Anyway, the apathy out there is very concerning, and some of the reasons that I've heard is, oh well, I have to work on Saturday, or oh well, I just can't be bothered to get down there, or nothing's going to change is my favorite one. It just feels like those are just cop-outs to me, right? It really does. And I'm not going to go down the line of, there are people that died for our democracy, because there are. We all know those stories. But you have a responsibility to your community and to yourself, right? To be engaged in what's going on. You can just put your head down and do what you do, and nothing, my vote isn't going to matter. Well, it does matter, because some of these races are going to be decided by a few votes, and every vote counts. Let's welcome Sean to the program. Sean, how are you?
Great. I just want to sort of comment on about people not knowing the candidates. But I'm thinking it has to do probably with they're relying on people to go on social media or internet, and I'm guilty of that just because this morning I had to take 15 minutes to find out about the candidates in order to pick my selection for the mayor and then my councillor.
Mm-hmm.
So it shouldn't have to be that way, because I was sort of anticipating a face-to-face visit from the candidates at my door.
So nobody showed up at your door?
No.
Wow. Nobody's been to mine either, to be honest.
And it's funny, it seems like that the signs didn't go up until last week.
Well, they've been up for a few weeks, but there's...
I just on my way to work, I've seen 2 signs in my subdivision, but then last week, I think it was Friday or something like that, I was going into Cole Harbor, and I seen a guy putting up a sign.
Yeah, and it'll get...
That shouldn't be a week before the advance polls or et cetera, right?
I totally agree. Right?
So, anyway.
Have a good one.
I made my choice this morning.
Good. Thanks for voting.
I actually talked to my counselor yesterday. I had a nice conversation with him. So
good. Awesome. Sean, I appreciate the call. Have a good one.
Hey, thank you.
902-405-6000 is the number. 902-405-6000. Why are people so disengaged? It's scary. It gets worse. It seems like it's getting worse. I think John DeMont had an article in the Herald last week where he ran down the numbers of voter participation throughout the years, and in the 50s, and I'm paraphrasing here, I might have my dates screwed up, but in the 50s we were seeing turnouts in the high 90s for elections, according to John's article, and now we'll be lucky to see anything in the 40s. I just don't understand it. Let's welcome Heather to the program. Heather, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
I'm just talking about, I hear a lot of people talking about elections, but I don't hear anybody talking about the drugs in our city. I know we have a lot of issues with homeless, and they're trying to get people off the streets into shelters and find housing for them. But if we don't deal with the original issue, like the drugs, you can put somebody into housing, but they have a drug issue that's going to really fall back on them. So who's dealing with the drugs? And if they're trying to get people off the street drugs, which they're putting them on the Suboxone and the methadone, but there seems to be no way to get off that. I know many of people that went and cried for help to try to get off these drugs, and there seems like you can't get off of it. There should be somewhere you can go and say, I'm done with it, I want to get off of this, and get help instead of trying to get them on the Suboxone and the methadone.
Are there not independent clinics in the city? I'm not familiar with them.
I'm not familiar either, but I know I've called plenty of places for a lot of clients, and they basically say your pharmacist has to wean you off. Like, there should be somewhere you can go sign yourself in and say, I want to help. I don't want to be on this anymore, and somebody help draw you out.
So that the city would build rehabs, or is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Okay.
To deal with the initiative, the part that's really bothering the people, like, you can
sense.
deal with the housing, but you can put the people in the houses. But if someone's on the drugs, or how are they going to stay in the house?
No, that makes sense, Heather. I appreciate your call.
Thank you.
902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. I think that's one of those issues that is felt very closely at the municipal level, but I'm not sure of where the jurisdiction and the funding for that lies. If that's a municipal responsibility, or if that's a provincial responsibility through the Department of Health, and if that's the case, are we in the same kind of merry-go-round, for lack of a better term, when we talk about the housing crisis and the finger pointing that goes on with that? I'm not really sure where that goes. Maybe somebody out there can educate me on it. And there's a number of lines open if you want to do just that, or if you want to talk about whatever it is on your mind. That's the beauty of Open Line Radio. Tony, you're on the line. We'll be with you right after the news. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Dan Alstrand along with you here on a Tuesday morning. A few lines open if you want to get in on the conversation here on the open hour, 902-405-6000. We'll welcome Tony to the show. Tony, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Dan. How's yourself?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
I'm lightheaded in the head more than usual this morning.
Okay.
Yesterday I was listening to Mr. Murphy's show, and over the weeks I've been listening to prospective candidates coming on and saying what they're going to do for me, right? I'm going to do this for me. I'm going to do this for the city. I'm committed to the city. I want to see their resume and where they graduated from and have a degree in politics. Do you get my point?
No, not really.
There is no playbook for being a politician, is there?
No, absolutely not.
So why are you telling me what you're going to do for me rather than what you're going to do? You're not doing anything for me. I don't want you to build a bike lane. So you're out of my choice. Here's what I'm pointing at. I was reading an article. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Catch-22.
No, not off the top of my head.
Okay. You may be familiar with this. You ever hear of the Peter Principle?
Yes.
Yeah. Here we go. It's a principle in which selection of a candidate for a position is based on the candidate's performance in their current role, rather than the abilities relevant to their intended role. Thus, employees only stop being promoted once they can no longer perform effectively, and managers rise to the level of incompetence. So what I'm saying is, you've got a lot of people running here, or in any election, that have absolutely no political background.
Experience.
How's that? That's the word I'll use rather than something nasty.
Okay.
And they are going to be, in this case, 1/16 of a group of people that are going to actually run the city of 450,000 people, and they're going to deal with a budget of $1.1 billion last year, I believe it was. So what gives them the credibility to do that? Where did they get their... I mean, does a cab driver ever have to deal with that kind of much money? Not that I don't respect cab drivers, so don't get all pissed off. I really do. But people have to have some knowledge.
So Tony, I don't want to put
how to navigate.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. So, are you suggesting that we only elect career politicians for these positions?
Oh, well, no. No, not technically, but you could draw that conclusion, but no. you got to have some background in what you're going to do.
Right.
Somebody's going to go on council, going to have a job making $100,000 a year, and hasn't got a blue idea what's going on.
Well, it
Correct?
doesn't mean that
really.
that doesn't mean that they don't bring some good ideas to the table and can be educated. That's what we have staff for, right? And can represent their constituency.
$100,000 a year.
Well, I mean, then if you can't, or you shouldn't run for office if you don't have any experience, then we're going to have nothing but career politicians in there. We'll get no new ideas.
3 people running for 16 offices, 16 positions, or whatever the case may be, and how many of those 73 have a really viable background to make those kind of decisions?
Well, what's a viable background?
Well, you tell me.
Well, that's like I normally catch what you're laying down, Tony, but I don't get it today.
What I'm saying is there's no resume. When somebody comes on and tells me they're going to do this, and this for me,
yep.
Why don't they tell me this is how I'm going to do this, and this for you? But no, or why don't they tell me, here's my background, here's why I feel competent, or confident, more than competent, to do this job. You don't hear that. And when I don't hear that, I want to know, well, why would I vote for somebody I know literally nothing about? All I know is they're going to spend my money, and they're not going to tell me how they're going to do it. And so, to me, that provides the Peter principle. Can I put in one other thing?
Very quickly, Tony, I got jam lines here. I want to get to as many as I can.
Okay, yeah, here you go. You said something about you have an obligation to vote.
You do.
And a responsibility. If I don't like any of the candidates,
spoil your ballot.
And I don't vote, then I'm a bad. Well, hang on, then I'm a bad person. And if I chose now to put a write-in in. You said that I can pick whoever I want, so I'm putting a write-in. Well, that write-in you're wasting your ballot. No, I'm not. I met my responsibility.
No, if you go through the process of making an informed decision, Tony, and you can't come up with somebody that you can support and you spoil your ballot, you got my respect.
You and I are on the same page on that. Have a great day, Dan.
You too,
Thank
sir.
You
902-405-6000. I think I've been very forthright on that. That if you make an informed vote and you go and say, look, I can't support any of these. Let's use the mayors, for example, 16 people. But you go through the process, you look at what everybody's doing, you look at what everybody's saying, and to Tony's point, what they're promising you they're going to do. And if you can't find somewhere that you can put your vote or support and you spoil your ballot, you have my respect. You went through the process. It's the people who just don't give two darns about voting and say that, well, whatever, I don't care. That's the ones that don't. That's just my opinion. Where are we going here? Let's, there he is. Hi, Bill Mott. Geez, I haven't talked to you almost a week.
Kind of quiet. Well, got to relax a little bit.
Cool. What's on your mind?
A few little things here for you. I'll make it quick. Andy Fillmore running. I'm still trying to get an answer. I wish he'd come up with the answer. What he's supposed to be going to do, putting the homeless down there at the post office where he's talking about.
Still, Bill, I don't think it's, and I know we've talked about this many times, I don't think Mr. Fillmore's plan at the post office is to put homeless people there. I think he wants to build housing there.
Oh, I don't know about that one. That's not the way.
Well, I'll tell you what, Bill. Andy's going to join our show on Friday, so I'll ask him that question. How's that? Okay.
Next one is down there at the parade square.
Yep.
Are we going to have our Remembrance Day there? Do you think this year with the place all fenced in, or what? Have you heard anything on that one?
Is it still fenced in? I don't think it's fenced in anymore. Is it?
I don't know. It was.
I haven't been. Maybe somebody that's on the line or is down there can see it. The last I heard that the fences came down, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Oh God, there's something. Oh yeah, the bike lanes.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure this one out. There. Why is this such a priority? Why are we blowing so much money? And how do we get like eight majority of councillors okay in this thing? I mean, where's this priority to spend that kind of money I mean, putting these concrete blocks on corners that are in the way of people, pedestrians, and everything else. I don't know why this is it. One more last thing. If
Sure.
you don't like a counselor in there, can you get them out?
Nope.
Is there some method?
No, we do not have recall legislation here.
It's not something. So somebody's there can do whatever they want practically.
For 4 years, unless I think there's a mechanism that council can remove a or counselor, but it's a mammoth project, and as for the electorate,
So the
I don't
public
think that we
can't-
can do that. No.
So the voters got to put up with them until the time is up.
So you got to make the right decision when you make the decision, Bill.
Go for it, sir. Appreciate it.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000. Let's welcome another Bill to the show. Bill, how are you?
Not too bad. How you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
Appreciate the call. I drive oil truck in Halifax. Been born here.
Yep.
I'm 74 years old. These bike lanes are a pain in the butt. They're a waste of money. Now, having said that, people come to Halifax because they want these big events. There's nowhere to park. The bike lanes are there. When I drove a bike in Halifax, I had to pay $2 for a license, and I was told to obey the rules of the road.
Mm-hmm.
These guys don't do that. They're going to spend $15 million on this bike lane. The woman in Colbert Road measured the street for the bike lanes and the cars and so forth. These guys don't care. They're going to do it anyway. So what's the sense of voting if they're going to do what they want anyway on Almond Street? They got in the corner of Almond and Pacific.
Well, Bill, I'll agree with almost everything you said, except what's the sense of voting? Because I'll never agree to that.
Well, I do hope. I don't like going in there and wasting my time with these councilors who say one thing, they get in power, which is great.
Yeah.
You don't even do it. They voted against that bike lane on the corner of Almond and Windsor because it's a bike lane. All the community voted against it. They said, well, it don't matter. We're going to do it anyway. So, like Bill said about the homeless people, put the money towards apartment buildings so you can get some practical use out of it. That's my opinion. I speak on behalf of all the truck drivers in Halifax that are delivering with these people. The bikes are pretty easy. These trucks kill people. And most of the bikers are pretty courteous and they're careful. That guy got killed there years ago on the corner of Hearing Cove and Wilson Cove Road.
Yep.
They blamed the truck driver. Do you know what happened there, though? It said the bike come out of that parking lot under the truck killed him. So these guys don't realize when it comes to trucks, they can't ban the trucks in Halifax. If they did, the Halifax would die. They need space and they need to have respect from the bikers and people walking on the streets. And it's not going to happen. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But I'm sorry, that's my opinion, but thank you for listening to me. I really appreciate it, and I love your show.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate you. 902-405-6000 is the number. We've got a couple of lines open. Need to take our last break here in the open hour. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Dan Alstrand along with you. The open hour continues. The number is 902-405-6000. That's how you get access to the show, just like Blair did. Blair, how are you?
I'm great.
What's on your mind today?
What's that?
What's on your mind today?
Well, elections on my mind. In the last century, I ran for city council, and I was at first thought as one of those people that, why did he run? Because he had no connection to anything. But I ran again, and I ran again. Still didn't win, but I kept involved.
Fair.
And so I did go on the city website to see how involved people are who are running in my area, because currently there's 6 of them. I got one brochure in the door through the mail, and one was on my front lawn where it blew off the step.
Okay.
And 4 no-shows. Nobody's been at the door, and I've gotten none of those ones that say, sorry, I missed you, because, of course, they just write that at somewhere else and stick it in the door. So it's hard. You have to go online. Historically, you're talking about the big voter turnout. Historically, it was because you went out to vote for the Protestant, you went out to vote for the Catholic, you went out to vote for the Liberal, you went out to vote for the Conservative. And part of those connections are gone now. They actually didn't let religious groups run against each other.
Blair, so if we brought party politics or affiliations back to municipal politics, we get more people out, you think?
Oh, well, we have party politics now.
Yeah.
there are people who are definitely, the guy from Ottawa is jumping ship because it's sinking.
Yep.
He's running for mayor, and he's probably got the lead because of that exposure. And then there's different ones around the city. If you read, they're supported by a union, they're supported by somebody who that's an NDP, that's a conservative. It's still happening. But it's the publicity we don't get anymore. I have to go online. There's no phone numbers. You can't call anybody, and you can't expect them at the door, but they expect you to vote.
Fair point, Blair.
And the other thing is they did vote for the bike lanes. Dalhousie has 25,000 students, and most of them are looking for parking spaces. I don't see 1,000 students on bicycles, so I don't know why they decided to vote for the bike lanes.
And now we're going to put one on University Avenue.
Yeah, great. We'll see how that works.
Blair, I appreciate the call.
Okay, bye.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Chris, how are you today?
Good morning. I'm fine. How are you, Dan?
I am well. What's on your mind?
Good. Well, the election, obviously, and who to vote for mayor mainly. I've already made up my mind for councillor for my district in the South End, so I'm good there. But look, everybody's calling, not everyone, but a lot of people calling in about high property taxes, bike lanes, curb bump outs, traffic humps, dedicated bus lanes that contribute to traffic slowdown and congestion, and numerous other taxpayer-wasted and funded projects that this council has done without consultation with the taxpayer. Well, guys, Andy Fillmore's fault. He had nothing to do with that. Who did? Wayne Mason, Pam Lovelace, and all the other incumbents. I'm not a liberal by no stretch, and I hate the Trudeau federal government more than anyone that I know. So I'm not necessarily a liberal fan at all or an Andy Fillmore fan, but I did have the opportunity to speak with Andy on an occasion recently. I asked him several pointed questions. He answered them matter-of-factly, without beating around the bush, yes or no answers, and that was good enough for me. That made my decision as to who I'm supporting as mayor. Wayne Mason has been my councillor for 12 years. He has been an abysmal failure in District 7, downtown South End, Halifax. Do not vote for this guy, and in my opinion, don't vote for any of the incumbents that are running because they don't deserve to be reelected. They've failed us. You don't give a passing grade to someone that fails. You don't give a promotion to someone who fails and does not excel at their job. So why should you give them a promotion by reelecting these people? They do not deserve it. I would say that Wayne Mason would be the worst possible mayor we could get. The choice to me is clear, and I would encourage anyone out there, look at the record of these people and what they've done or not done for the city. Make your decision accordingly. None of these incumbents, in my opinion, I'll repeat it again, they do not deserve to be reelected because they have failed us miserably.
Chris, appreciate the call.
Thank you, Dan.
And Chris, as much as him and I sometimes differ on things that we talk about, to be engaged and to have that conversation. I know it's not easy to nail down a mayoralty candidate, but to have that question and make an informed decision is all anybody can ask. And for those that maybe can't have the opportunity or don't have the opportunity to actually have a face-to-face with Andy Fillmore, that we're going to do here on the program on Friday. I'm going to have him in the studio or on the phone, I'm not sure yet. And we'll ask him some of the questions that have been raised over the last few weeks here on the program. That is my promise to you. Sydney, how are you? Hello, Sydney. Are you there? One more time for Sydney. I'll stick you on hold and see if Vanessa can sort out the problem with that. Let's welcome Grant to the show. Grant, how are you?
Hi, good morning. I'll give my 2 cents on why I think some people don't care about the election.
Sure.
I mean, I went to the websites of some of the candidates.
Mm-hmm.
They all just sound the same. Wayne Mason has, I think, an 8 or 9 page pamphlet. I'm not going to read every word of it.
Sure.
I'm not, because there's I don't know how many candidates are there, 12, 13?
16.
And it's just 50. Okay, there you go. So there's 15. The ones I've seen, the main ones, they're all so similar. It's kind of boring, and I genuinely think that's why some people just don't care. It feels like it doesn't matter anyways. I know it matters. Hold on, I didn't say it doesn't. But a lot of people just feel like things aren't going to change. That's what I think.
Grant, can I just ask you a quick question, Grant? If somebody is has done what you were doing, right, and you're logging onto the sites and you're doing the groundwork on this, and you go through this and you're like, oh well, they're all the same. Then to put that much effort into learning about it, then why wouldn't you follow through with figuring out where best your vote should land? And if not, why not just go out and spoil your ballot, but actively participate in the election?
Well, I'm not done yet. I'm still going to do my homework, and it might even be for one of the lesser candidates, but they're not going to win, right? They're not going to win. There's only 2, maybe 3 candidates who could win. I mean, let's be honest. And then in my riding, I don't know the number, but it's Rockingham, Fairview area. I think
that's 11, isn't it? No, 15. Sorry, my bad. 15.
So there's 2 candidates. Well, Catherine Morse is the incumbent. I already told her, emailed her, said, I'm not voting for you because she voted in support of putting an encampment in Point Pleasant and the Commons. And I think that was a terrible decision. It's out of touch. It's dangerous. I said, I'm not voting for you just because of that. So that leaves me one person. And it's just like,
No, I understand, but again, at least you're active and at least you're trying. You're not just sloughing it off.
No, but a lot of people
they do.
I went through a get-together Saturday, and I said, who are you voting for? They live in Gatesbrook. And he said, oh, I'm not, right? 32-year-olds. They said, we're not. They honestly had no clue that there's an election.
That's scary.
I'm not exaggerating.
That's scary.
No idea. They see the signs, but it just kind of feels like fluff to a lot of people. I'm not saying it is, but that's the impression I get. I'm voting. I'm doing my homework, but...
Good for you, Grant. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your call.
Thank you.
We're just out of time, everybody. For those I didn't get to today, my apologies. We'll reopen the phone lines tomorrow. Don't forget, tomorrow's Wednesday, so we'll be doing house calls from 11 to 12, and then the open hour from 12 until 1 o'clock. Do your homework. Participate. The worst thing you can do, let me rephrase that. The scariest thing that you can do as an elector is to vote. If we had mass turnout for an election, that would scare the living heck out of the establishment. Because they're banking on us not voting. They're banking on 38% voter participation, because then they don't have to get as many votes in their districts and in the mayor's race to get elected. If you said, nope, I'm doing this and I'm going to go out there and mark my ballot, or I'm going to log on and mark my ballot, that will scare the heck out of the establishment. Mark my words. We're going to stop down and take a break. When we come back, Dr. Rob is in the house. It's time for Science Files. You have a science-related question? Dr. Rob's here to answer them. 902-405-6000. We're back after the news.
Axe.
Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Dan Allstrand along with you. Our telephone number is 902-405-6000. This is Science Files. He is Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University there in the lovely downtown, or I guess south end of Halifax. And he's here to answer your science-related questions. If you have something that you'd like to ask the good doctor about, here is your opportunity. 902-405-6000. We were kidding off the air before we came on. If you heard it in the news today that it's Nobel season, right? It's
yes,
that time of year where these prestigious prizes get handed out, and they handed out the
where they sit around and go, oh wow, who are we going to give it to this year?
That's right. Who's going to what kind of somebody that we've never anyway? Yeah. The Nobel Prize in Physics was handed out today. It was announced today, and a British Canadian researcher, Geoffrey Hinton from the University of Toronto, was honored as a co-winner of it with a guy from Princeton. And of course, the first thing I told Rob is that whenever the physics Nobel Prize for Physics comes out, I look for his name attached to it.
Here we go.
And then Dr. Sheldon Cooper, but that's done now too. So anyway, do you know Geoffrey Hinton, and have you met the
I met Jeff Hinton
Mr.
a couple of times, so very briefly. But he's done a lot of amazing things, although I mean, he has this really sort of like curious legacy now that he's become famous for speaking out against AI as opposed to the research he's done. So it's a bit of a mixed legacy now. But you do have to say, when you look at what he and his various students and postdocs and collaborators have done, it is pretty incredible. I mean, one of the things that people forget is that AI is not new. It's been around since the late 1950s, right? And so that was people literally trying to say, can we turn problems into code or represent it as data which we can then apply codes to? And so there's been series of sort of booms and busts within the AI field. There was a lot of money went into it in the late 60s, early 70s, and then in the mid 70s they realized, it can't do all of these things we hope it could do. And so it all scaled back. And then Jeff kind of comes into the field around the mid 80s, I believe, did some stuff. Didn't quite work so well, but then over a period of time, the computing power got better, the ideas for the algorithms got better, and then boom, we've had this explosion of stuff happening from probably about 15 years ago onwards.
James Cameron predicted it in like 1981 in Terminator, didn't he? With the Rise of the Machines?
I'll be back.
There you go.
Yeah.
The Terminator. Again, if you have a science-related question, 902-405-6000 is the number. Dr. Rob is here for the next hour to answer them. Dr. Rob, we were chatting earlier in the program today about what's happening in the Gulf of Mexico right now. And those unfortunate people in Florida who are going to have to deal with another major hurricane. Most predictions are that this thing's going to be a Category 3. It's currently a 4. It was a 5 earlier.
Yeah, it's been downgraded overnight, right?
Yeah, and they're expecting it to be a 3, which is still a nasty storm.
It's big.
It's like, and it's strong, and
right.
I guess maybe the physics of these things we kind of understand. At least I do.
Yeah.
That these things are depressed, low pressure systems that get fed from warm water. How does that work?
So really, you're creating a system whereby you're driving energy upwards, and then it's turning over and converting into circulation. And so really, that's the key thing that the warm water does. It will drive energy up and into the system, and then the key thing with the circulation is, although there is this thing called the Coriolis force, which is actually a very, very weak force associated with the spin of the Earth, when you take a system that's quite large, all of that will actually end up converting into a coherent circular motion, right? And so when you add in all of the warm water driving the energy increase, then that will actually increase the circulation, increase the size of the hurricane as well, and then you can wind up with these massive systems. I mean, if you go over cooler water, then they tend to dissipate their energy, right? And that's one of the key things. If anyone has ever been sort of like watching what's called the sea surface temperature anomaly maps, and those will tell you whether water is warmer or colder. When we have something coming up towards us, the first thing I'm doing is saying, is there cold water there? Please let there be cold water there, right? And so, but very often, crazily enough, we often have very warm water around us compared to what we would have expected over the last 30 years. So that is the key thing, right? It's the driver from the warm water that really makes a difference. And so when you go down to the Gulf, and the Gulf it's warm, but I looked at the anomaly maps, it's only about a degree or so warmer than normal. So I'm really surprised to see this massive and sudden intensification
and how
going
quick.
up 80 miles an hour in the space of 9 hours, I think they said.
Yeah.
That's really surprising to me, given that the it is warm, it is above normal, but it's not like 3-4 degrees above normal, which we do sometimes. I mean, we see that around Nova Scotia sometimes.
And one of the concerns, at least with authorities, I just watched a bit of a news conference during the break. One of the authorities are concerned about is the storm surge that's associated with this.
Yep.
Rob, how does a hurricane of this strength contribute to storm surge? Does it pull the water right out of the out of the
it's
Gulf?
literally there's a certain amount of friction between the wind, right, and that's going to move water around. And when you move water around, you can also have a situation with changes in pressure as well. When you move that water around, then you can have really significant increases in the overall level of the water, and that to me, ultimately, for coastal districts, that's the most damaging thing that they're going to actually suffer from. I mean, I'm just going to say it. I mean, I still have kittens a little bit when we have something coming up here in case we have a major storm surge, because you look at all of our infrastructure is comparatively close to the waterline. So if we did have a major storm surge that came up into the harbor, that could be.
And we saw that with Juan, right? We saw Juan come right up the Halifax harbor, and the storm surge associated with that storm, though, not obviously as strong as this Hurricane Milton is in Florida, but it did. I mean, it put water into Lower Water Street. So, I mean, it can happen here.
Yep.
It happened here during the last few storms that we had. Rizzers Beach got whacked, right, with storm surge and with wind.
So one of the things that would be really bad here is if we had one of these big winter cyclones come up, and then we actually had sort of like blockages in the drains and things like that, because then, wow, you can't get rid of the water that's coming in. I mean, I will say, people sort of say that if you look at the data, there's a reasonable amount of evidence that actually these systems are stronger because of climate change. That's pretty much agreed by the people who do so-called attribution studies. But the thing that I've noticed people talking about is they also move more slowly, because if the atmosphere is warmer, it's more stable, and the systems don't tend to move as quickly along their paths as you would expect. And so that has a double whammy. You've got more water in the system, and then it's moving more slowly over you. So it dumps more rain. And that's really one of the things that we saw, oh my goodness, just 10 days ago.
Right,
with Helene. And now we've got another system coming through, although it looks like this one is moving reasonably quickly from the track, but I could be wrong on that. I'm not sure.
And just to belay any fears, I looked just before I came on the air this morning at all the latest guidance on there's 3 major hurricanes that are happening right now in the Atlantic Basin, and all 3 of them are giving us a pass, at least at this point. So nothing to worry about here, but I think it serves as a reminder, and we had a fairly close brush earlier this year, so I mean, it can happen just that quickly.
Well, so we did have a sort of like calm period. Apparently there was certain patterns off the coast of Africa.
Dust.
That literally slowed down the creation, and so we've been lucky with that, and now... You know, we've got October into November and now sometimes into December for these systems to form. So we're not out of the woods.
Yeah, and, we obviously send our thoughts to those in Florida who are busy right now.
I mean, just seeing the footage of all of the traffic queues is just crazy.
And dealing with 10 days ago, dealing with another monster, and that brought 20-foot storm surge and winds, and now some of those areas are going to get it again.
So this is the thing that gets me. Like, if these things become regular, we are going to have to invest in infrastructure that survives these kind of events. Now, when you have massive washout, there's not much you can do about that.
That was my question. Right. I mean, unless we're building houses on stilts that are 30 feet off the ground, how do we survive storm surge?
Hong Kong has a ton of monsoon rain, and so for years they had really flood-prone hotspots within the city, but they've spent, I don't know, it's a ridiculous amount of money building large underground drainage systems. Now, admittedly, for us, that's very difficult because we're on top of rock, right? But they've done that, and they've been able to actually create a city that even when they have a massive, 10 inches, 12 inches of rain, they can actually get rid of most of that water, which is pretty impressive. I have to say that. And a lot of people who live in the area say, well, we've spent enough money on it. But that's the nature of building infrastructure that's designed to cope with these extreme events. Now, of course, if you have storm surge, nothing you can do about that.
No, there's really not, unless, like I said, you build your house 30 feet off the ground on a stilt and hope that the stilts stay and are able to sustain it. Because we know the hydraulic pressure of the water can be quite severe, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, all of that is going to come down to what you're basically turning your foundation into with all of the water there. Because if it turns into slurry, you're toast, basically.
Yeah. Anyway, again, our thoughts with all those affected down in the Florida areas. Looks like it's going to hit tomorrow night, evening-ish, around 9 o'clock. So we'll stay on top of that and bring you the latest information that we can. Couple people on the line. We'll get to your calls after the first break. You're listening to Science Files. This is the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. He's Dr. Rob Thacker. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Dan Olstrand here at Science Files. He's Dr. Rob Thacker, here to answer your science-related questions. Our telephone number is 902-405-6000. We welcome Carl to the program. Carl, how are you?
Oh, very well. How are you guys doing?
Good. Your question for Dr. Rob, please.
Well, I have a whole bunch. I researched a little more about San Onofre over there in California.
Okay.
And, I didn't realize that used to be a power station. Mm-hmm. And so they've been storing waste there for the 50 years already. It's shut down. They don't produce
They
power
probably got
anymore.
all of the pools for doing that, et cetera. Yeah.
Right. What I thought was really interesting, I saw online they're creating black holes in a lab. And this one black hole that they created was like starting to glow. Have you seen this story at all?
Yeah, so I'm going to stop you just for a sec there, Carl. So when they say they're creating black holes in a lab, what they're really doing is creating things that share some of the same kind of descriptive properties as black holes. So you could say they were literally trying to simulate black holes, but they aren't actually black holes, right? They have the system, it's quantum dots as far as I can remember, a particular quantum mechanical configuration.
Physics,
Yeah, and so that allows them to produce a system that will basically have certain kind of, how can I put it, trapping behaviors that are similar to what the event horizon of a black hole will do. And so they talk about these as being analogs of black holes, but they're not the same thing, right? They're really not.
Well, it's still pretty interesting that they can even create that. And real quick on the hurricane, my goodness, my sister's battening down the hatches, and I lost a house on the beach in 2016 in Florida, and boy, my heart goes out to everybody who's hurting out there being devastated by these storms.
Sure.
We enjoyed the waves, but then the destruction. So we actually used to go and clean up hurricane areas because we enjoyed the waves so much that we thought we'd give back that way. And we did that for decades.
Cool.
All right, have a good day.
Thanks, Carl. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Black holes is Rob Thacker's jam.
Well, I mean, if we're going to go there, I'd say my colleague Luigi Gallo is me. I mean, black holes really are his jam. That's what he's famous for. His whole research is about actually looking at black holes with X-ray telescopes.
So if we created one in a lab, would it not swallow the lab up?
Not a really, really small one, but you don't want to be messing around with things like that, right? So
it's like a Star Trek episode.
We don't know of how we would do that anyway. We don't have the technology. You need a lot of energy density. And so we had a very sort of like brief concern of people saying, oh, what happens with certain possible particle theories? Could we possibly have a tunneling event that creates a microscopic black hole? But really, no.
Sounds like a Star Trek episode or something.
Sure.
Right? That's the new song. Going to be the latest. See, we came up with
T-shirt.
T-shirt.
Scotty?
We came up with T-shirt ideas last week. Now we're going to create $1 million idea with these black holes. Yeah. Hey, buy a black hole for your neighbor. Make his house disappear. Yeah. Welcome, Tom, to the program. Tom, how are you?
Good. I'm good. How are you?
Good. What's your question for Dr. Rob, please?
I was curious if when spacecrafts come back into the Earth's atmosphere, they have a protected heat shield.
Sure.
Did they have to increase the protection due to the buildup of CO2 gases in the atmosphere?
No. At the end of the day, that's a small enough change for the purposes of how much heat you create when you come back in that they aren't really going to be worrying about that too much. You've got so much material in the atmosphere that adding a few parts per million or whatever it is for CO2 is not really going to change your overall calculations, right? You've got this dominant contribution of nitrogen, there's oxygen thrown in there as well, and those are going to be the key things that produce the slowing down that turns into heat, basically, the friction that turns into heat as it re-enters.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. Let's go right back to the phone lines. Dave, how are you?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. The topic of hurricanes. Just curious, this is Milton, I think, that's bearing down on Tampa area. First one in about 100 years that they might take a direct hit, which actually surprises me a wee bit there.
Me too.
100 years ago, Tampa had about 100,000 people. 100 years ago, 1920, not even. It had a boom shortly after 1920. So now, fast forward to 2024, we have, I think, near 3 million, and they're all trying to get out of town in a hurry now. So I think when these things strike, we populated this planet without thinking where we're developing. I just heard your last caller, we lost a home on the waterfront. Well, unfortunately, waterfronts changed all the time, just like rivers. They shift, they change. The world is constantly shifting. And when we populated these things, Katrina that hit New Orleans, they knew that levee was going to be a problem, the lake up top of New Orleans. And they didn't do anything about it. They knew the big one was coming. And hurricanes, I guess my question to you is hurricanes are a natural phenomena. And, you know, you look at the Everglades, it's filled up by hurricanes. And the Everglades is an incredible habitat that we need. So much life is in the swamps and marshes and lakes and what have you. So, and another thing I question, not you, Rob, so much, but science. I mean, every year, we're frightened and terrified of being hit by hurricanes because we did get one. We do get them here. We're sticking way out in the middle of Atlantic, if anybody takes a look at the geography of Nova Scotia. And we're on track. But this year, there's nothing. We had a subtropical storm.
No, it's not prejudge it. Let's not jinx anything yet, because we're not out of it.
Please, we've still got time to go in the season.
I would be quite happy if nothing hit here.
Right.
Things are cooling down now. We're chilling down. I don't know, poke your nose outside today. It's cold. So the weather is...
Go and look at the sea surface temperature anomaly maps around Nova Scotia. We're still considerably above seasonal averages.
Well, that's fair, but I rather doubt that we're going to get anything severe, but that's possible.
Well, I hope so too.
Me too, Dave, but I don't want to jinx anything.
No, of course not. Nobody wants it, but they're natural phenomena, and we've built up, look at our waterfront. We're still building down there. These new buildings are going in right up, beautiful buildings, but they're right on the waterfront.
All right, Dave, your question, please.
My question is to Rob, do you consider this a natural phenomena, hurricanes? Is it something we're just seeing broadening now, or have we made the mistake of building in such areas that maybe we shouldn't? Floodplains and such have you? And one more thing on this African thing, and yes, you're right. I've been looking into that. Like, again, we were told that we were going to get above average hurricanes this year. Well, we're not at this point in time.
Okay.
And let's hope that we don't. But something in Africa happened that nobody predicted, and it changed the trajectory the construction of hurricanes off the coast of Africa, where most of them start. Can I hang on to the line and listen to you, or do you want me to hang up?
No, sure, Dave. I'll put you on hold so you can hear him. How's that?
Okay. So 2 billion people on the planet live on floodplains, right? There's a lot of people who are at risk, right? And this is a situation where we all know what's happening. We've talked about this on the show before. We've gone from a situation of really planning for once-in-a-100-year events to now those once-in-a-100-year events often becoming once-in-every-20-year events or even less, right? And so this is a thing for municipal planning that we are having to deal with. It's particularly bad, ironically, in the UK, right, where you can have situations where, like, whole cities are built on floodplains, right? And so, of course, they flood. I mean, we have that with Winnipeg to a certain extent. So this is something that has been a long time coming, and the changes that are happening with climate change. Hurricanes are tricky systems. They're one-offs. It's very difficult to do what's called the attribution studies to determine the overall impact of climate change on them, but there generally seems to be a viewpoint that is supported by a number of papers that, in fact, they are being strengthened by climate change, particularly because we're seeing significant heating of waters associated with climate change. And that is the key sort of like factor. A number of people initially thought that perhaps with climate change, the atmosphere would become warmer and become more stable. Right. So, but what seems to have happened is on small scales, it's still capable of producing these things. And then on larger scales, their actual tracks are moving more slowly, which is this double whammy of, like I said, bigger systems that move more slowly. And that's a problem. So with Africa, the thing I would say about the situation there and the stalling of the formation of a number of systems is that's good in terms of us saying, not such a bad Atlantic hurricane season for the early parts of the summer. But you can't rely upon that happening all the time, right? And that's the key thing. Yes, we cannot perfectly predict the future. We can't do that. We can predict trends, though, to a reasonable amount of accuracy, and that's all that we can do.
Thanks for the call, Dave. We're up against the break. The Science Files continues on the other side. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Holstrand. He's Dr. Thacker. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. This is Science Files. He's Dr. Rob Thacker, and he is here to answer your science-related questions. If you have a question you'd like that's maybe been bugging you, here's an opportunity for Rob to take a shot at and try and make you feel better. 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. Let's go to the phone lines and welcome Tom to the show. Tom, how are you?
Great. I was just curious if do black holes increase in size and why?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. So, it's actually, it's not an easy thing to say what is the actual size of a black hole. So we talk about something called the event horizon. And the event horizon is the point at which, beyond that, you're going to get crushed out of existence in the black hole, right? You're not getting free. Not even light can go fast enough to get free. So that's kind of how we associate a size with them. Because when you think about what actually happens to all of the material, Einstein's theory says all of that material gets condensed down, crushed down into a single point, which is kind of nuts. We know that actually that can't really happen. There has to be quantum mechanical processes happening that sort of like produce something, although, we don't know. And we will likely never, ever know what's inside a black hole, because once you go in, you can't get out to tell anyone what you found. So there we go. And so that's what we use to describe their size, the event horizon. And yes, as you put more material into a black hole, you add more mass, stuff falls into it, then the actual radius of that event horizon will grow with time. So they do get bigger. And so now we know of black holes that range in mass from a bit bigger than the sun all the way up to billions of times the mass of the sun. There's a real mass spectrum.
One more little point.
Sure.
My theory is, if the Big Bang theory is correct, which I think it is, but is it possible for billions and billions of years that black holes gobble up the whole universe and become a Big Bang? It has everything, and then it becomes the Big Bang, spreads it all out, and then
I know where you're going with it. Okay.
And then, okay, good.
So there is this slight confusion because we talk about the creation of the universe being a singularity, and then we talk about the center of a black hole being a singularity. And people often wonder, are they kind of the same? And the answer is they're actually quite fundamentally different. And so with a black hole, you have this squished down point right in the middle, the so-called singularity point. And that exists essentially when you look at Einstein's particular equations and so on. That exists for all of time, but only in a certain place. Whereas when you look at the universe and the start of the universe, that particular singularity exists only at time equals 0, and it's everywhere, which is kind of nuts. So the two solutions actually have very, very different properties. And so even though people do kind of wonder, could we somehow go and create other universes within black holes, the overall structure of the solutions is actually very, very different. And so they're not really relatable in an easy way. You have to literally shift time and space, which in a funny kind of way can kind of happen inside a black hole. But for that to happen in the stuff outside a black hole, we don't know how that would happen.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
902-405-6000 is the number, 902-405-6000. Back to the phones, and we welcome John to the program. John, how are you?
Not too bad. How are you people doing?
Good. What's
thanks.
on your mind today?
What's on my mind? It might not be in your realm of knowledge, Doctor, but I was wondering, if you have looked over the Coastal Protection Act, what is your opinion on it, for one thing? And secondly, do you not think that it is misnamed? Because when I drive to the valley or anywhere into the interior of the province, whether I'm high up on what we have for mountains around here, I'm seeing signs everywhere, Coastal Protection Act now. Mm-hmm. So I believe people are misled by how our politicians name events. They're thinking that it's actually going to protect the coast, but what I'm getting from it all, it's about putting rules on developing, not actually protecting.
Yeah. So I'm going to be very open and say, although I have colleagues who work specifically in this area, this is not something that I know enough about to give you a reasonable answer on. I do tend to agree that when you look at what's happened in the past few months, years, and the sort of, I don't know, did they technically repeal certain parts of it?
They never passed it.
They never passed it.
It passed through the House and was never received a cent.
Okay.
So they left it up to the individual municipalities.
Yeah.
So here we have the situation that there are a lot of people who want to build close to the water, And there are a lot of circumstances under which, from a nature preservation perspective, that may not be a good idea, and it may not be a good idea solely from an infrastructure perspective as well. And so that kind of legislation is obviously right at the anvil of individual wishes versus government. And so with this in mind, I have colleagues who really strongly support the act, who are very sort of like pro getting assent and so on. And so I tend to think that people, while they want to build in certain places for obvious reasons, there should be clear and well-defined rules in place. I mean, people will turn around and say, what about freedom? I can build there, and if my house goes into the water, that's it, right? That's my loss. But there's a number of other arguments for why that's probably not the way to go.
John, thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000 is the number. I think we can probably go down that along a different ways.
It's more of a political discussion than it is so much about the science, I think, in this case. So,
but I think to keep it in the realm of science, that certainly protecting our coastlines from things like erosion and climate change is something that everybody should be concerned about, because
very much so.
You don't have to go very far. I mean, I mentioned Rizzers Beach during the last storm last year, and it got wiped out. So it's coming. Right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can speak to this from personal experience of growing up. Like, my mum and dad came from a village just 5 miles down the road from Lowestoft, where we live. There was a village called Kessingland. And Kessingland was known for having a sandy beach in the 1940s at the end of the Second World War. By the time I was born in the decade, so much stone had been deposited that the sea had gone out about 400 or 500 meters. So all of these houses that were built behind the seawall, they built this really big seawall just after the Second World War. And so all of the kids would dive off it and so on. That was miles from the water's edge by the time I was a kid, right? And so people had built these houses, and it always amused me that they put the living room upstairs so you could see the sea, right? And they were 500 meters away from the seashore. Right, so they saw a lot of pebbles.
Yeah, lots of rocks.
And so that is an example of how coastlines change so rapidly and so strongly, and you have to be wary of the power of the ocean.
Email question, Dr. Rob, from Mark. It says, has Dr. Rob heard of a company called Spin Launch? Apparently,
yes,
it requires no rocket fuel, thus reducing the risk of a catastrophic event during launch and a huge reduction in pollution. They're spun into space on a centrifuge?
Yeah, they literally have a system where they accelerate the object by going round and round and round and round, and then literally you stop the connection that keeps it going round and round, and it goes off in a straight line and goes straight up. But the problem with it is you can only really do it with systems that you can protect from very high G-forces, because these things are going round incredibly quickly. There are ways to do that. Gerard Bull, who built many of the super-powered cannons that were developed in the 1960s and 70s, the HARP project, he actually came up with a way of protecting electronics, literally by encasing it in epoxy resin and things like that. But there's that adds additional weight. It's not very efficient, and so on. So it's really difficult to really come up with a sort of like great app for this. I'm not sure that it's going to take off, although kudos to the people who've done it, and they've demonstrated. I think they're doing a few kilogram things at the moment. That's about the most they can do.
Is it conceivable that, not necessarily with the spin people, but is it conceivable that we will be able to achieve orbit in Earth without sitting on top of a bomb?
I don't see how we're ever going to be able to create a situation where if we have a kinetic launch, we can actually turn that into an orbit. You need to reposition the rocket. There's no getting away from it. So you're going to have fuel, right? With spin launch, my guess is they're just looking for suborbital, right? I don't see how, unless they put, again, some kind of fuel on the things they're sending up, how they're going to turn into orbital systems.
We haven't developed anything with enough thrust to get us that high.
Well, I would argue that we have, because the HARP cannons that were built in the 60s and 70s, they would get things 60 to 70 kilometers up, right? But you're coming straight back down again,
Right.
basically. So it's a cheap way of doing what are called sounding rockets. Sounding rockets will go up, and then Canada has a great history in sounding rockets. We're not famous for it, but the most popular sounding rocket ever built was built by Magellan Aerospace, the Black Brant. So we've been doing that, and then people were interested in firing things up, and then we stopped kind of doing research on that, although there was this whole thing with Iraq trying to build a giant cannon, Matrix Churchill exporting great big pipes that were supposed to be for oil pipelines, but were actually for building a giant cannon. So you can do that, but it's still limited in terms of what you can really do with it.
Need to stop down and take another break. You're listening to the Science Files. This is the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. He's Dr. Rob Thacker. We're back after the break. Welcome back. This is Science Files. I'm Dan Alstrand. He's Dr. Rob Thacker. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. If you have a science-related question, this is your opportunity to join the show. Dr. Rob, we've had a lot of discussions over the last few weeks about that little, and by little I mean the size of a school bus asteroid that is on its way here, and it's going to get captured in the orbit and do that horseshoe orbit. Mini-moon, or mini-me, as I like to call it. But that has obviously spark some debate about something much larger, and some out there are now suggesting that that asteroid that wiped the dinosaurs off the planet isn't that's not a one-time event. We could see that.
Yeah, I mean, there is always a risk. I mean, there's no getting away from that. So that's one of the reasons why there's a new mission that NASA is working on to put a space telescope up there that will see anything coming from the direction of the sun. I mean, that is the hardest place on the sky to find any of these asteroids. And so if there are any on unique orbits that actually sort of like come towards us, then this new mission, and I'm blanking on the name. It's Neo something, but I keep thinking Neosat, but that was actually the Canadian mission that was supposed to do the same thing. So anyway, and yeah, there is always a finite probability of one of these things coming along. And so we do spend quite a reasonable amount of effort looking for them with telescopes. And in fact, the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope, or Rubin Telescope, as it's called now, which is the best survey telescope ever made, that will actually be contributing new information about the things that are out there that could be dangerous. And so we're looking forward to that. But the main problem with Rubin is it's just looking at one hemisphere of the sky. Right, because it's down in Chile, so it would be nice to have something equivalent in the northern hemisphere, so we can put the two of them together. But when it's a $790 million project, you don't get too many of those around the world.
If we spot something, like if we, for whatever reason and however we do it, if
what
we
can
say,
we do?
Yeah, like we've all seen the movie, right?
Yeah.
Like, do we launch a rocket into it? Is there a contingency plan? Have the minds that think thought about this?
The first thing to remember is I can come on the show and we can talk about it. But no, I mean, so funnily enough, there are lots of training probably isn't the right word. There are lots of simulated projects that happen around the world that are essentially collaborations between space agencies of how we're going to coordinate on this. But in terms of true international collaboration on building something that would be a mission to the asteroid, you've got to have enough time. See, if you spot something and you've got 2 years, at the moment, we're not much we could do in that kind of time scale, right? Maybe Elon Musk could sort of like contribute a launch vehicle. He probably could, right? But then if it was very distant, how would we get there? I mean, we don't necessarily have the Delta V. Maybe Starship Heavy would be good enough for doing an intercept mission. It's probably the closest thing that we have for that kind of stuff. But even then, if you have to do a lot of maneuvering at the end, that's really hard because you've spent a lot of your fuel to get up there in the first place, right? So it's really kind of difficult to do this. We did the DART mission, where we literally fired something into an asteroid. And again, it depends upon what it's made of. This is the crazy thing. A rubble pile is a very different thing to deal with compared to a solid metal-like M-type asteroid. One of those is solid, one of those isn't. And the behavior of something that isn't solid is much more unpredictable than something that is solid, right? So we still have things to learn. But don't don't lose too much sleep, because we have found a lot of the really big things, right? And we're fairly confident we understand many orbits quite well. And so I certainly don't worry about this too much myself. Certainly for the next 50 to 100 years, we're pretty good on that front. Smaller things, yeah, okay. City killer things, still an outside possibility of one of those, sure. But remember, only 1 to 2% of the Earth's surface is actually inhabited. Right, so the probability of even something like that, most of the things come down and we don't even know. Right, and that's the crazy thing. Like, there was a really big event over South America a few years ago, and it was like, happened. We didn't see it. Right, they tracked it from space, and there was sort of like a few kiloton explosion over South America, and it was like no one. Well, maybe some tribes down there saw it, but most of the reporters just went completely unnoticed. Right. So
I mean, in theory, and again, I know we're talking theory here, but if something was identified and we were able to use this DART or whatever it is, would it be the theory would be to change its trajectory, to move it?
Changing its trajectory is always the best solution. So the best idea is you capture it very early. You see something and then you calculate the orbit and you're like, ooh, in 20 years' time, that's going to be in the keyhole and it's a problem, right? So if you have that situation, then what you do is you send a mission without Bruce Willis. Oh, poor old Bruce Willis, poor guy. So, but I was going to make Bruce Willis jokes.
Armageddon. We all saw the movie.
Can't do that now. So, but the point is, you're going to send something up there that's going to sit on this thing and literally throw material off it. And in throwing material off it, that's exactly what a rocket does. Stuff coming out the back makes it go forward. Right? So if you do that, you're creating thrust. And if you do that for long enough, you will actually deflect the asteroid away from the keyhole and it won't be a problem. And so that's really the best idea that we have. Blowing things up, it's silly because you create this huge debris field.
Which is
right?
going to cause problems anyway.
Which is as dangerous, if not more so. Right, so you want to kind of keep them together. That's the interesting thing about the dinosaur impact. It looks like there may have been another piece of it that came down off the coast of Africa. So one on the Mexican side and one on the African side. That's a possibility, which is kind of like nuts, because then you'd have two tsunamis racing across the ocean going towards one another, which is just incomprehensible. Wow.
Now that we've scared everybody, Rob.
Well, so the summary sort of like, could we launch black holes via spin launch that would fix climate change? That's like the theme of the show today.
And or just everything sucked up into a hurricane, one or the other.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
You sent me an article earlier this week that kind of piqued my interest, and it was about Venice and them and engineering. Yeah. It's kind of topical what we've been talking about today, and they're able to stave off a multi-generational flood.
So Vienna.
Right. Sorry.
Vienna. Yeah. So Vienna has a history of having floods, right, for hundreds of years. And so they have spent, well, quite frankly, a lot of money, but they've spent it to build an entire floodway in the middle of the city called the New Danube. And so if they have a massive deluge, like tens of thousands of cubic meters of water that they have to get rid of every second, then they open that floodway and start passing the water out that way. Now,
is it like Winnipeg's? Because Winnipeg has a floodway.
Except it's right in the middle.
Right in the middle, okay. Not around it.
Not like around it, exactly. So that is one of their ways. And so even with that in place, which worked really quite well, they still had some flooding that got from a smaller tributary in the city into some of their light rail system. Right? But that is something, and Austria itself spends like 70 million euros a year on flood protection. Right? So and it's a fairly modest-sized country as well. So that's a reasonable amount of investment. That's the kind of thing you have to think about. You have to plan for these things. Taxes.
Well, that's where I was going. See, get out of my mind, Dr. Rob. That's always the toughest sell. Like, I mean, I'll relate that to Halifax and say that when the gentleman that was in that chair yesterday here talking about his career as mayor 12 years ago first started in that job, I remember having a conversation with him, and he said, look, we have a billion with a B dollars worth of...
So let me give you an argument, which I actually think holds a lot of water, but not very many people actually agree with, right? And so if you look at the building of the USA, right, they did a ton of infrastructure building that didn't benefit the generation that built it significantly, right? And I think of the Hoover Dam. Mm-hmm. A lot of people died building the Hoover Dam. They got it going, but the payoff of that really was decades after it was built, right? Same thing to a certain extent with the Eisenhower highway system, right? All of the benefits of that have been accrued by other generations. We're now at a point where if you look at a lot of the electricity infrastructure, that was built decades ago. And we as a generation have to start doing some of this infrastructure building again. This is one of the reasons why I think we're actually going to go into a kind of like new industrial building revolution for the next couple of decades, because there's a lot of stuff we've got to do to prepare for the future world that we're going to be living in, right? And we can't turn around and say, we'll leave it to the next generation. That ain't going to work.
We need to be proactive.
It's going to be
as
more
opposed to
expensive
reactive.
for them to do it than it is for us.
Right? And like to finish my thought, the mayor said 12 years ago that there was over $1 billion in infrastructure under the streets and sewers of Halifax that needed repaired, and I don't think that's ever happened.
Yeah.
So
no, I get why people don't like paying for these things if they think the benefits are going to accrue to another generation. But those are the kind of things we have to do as humans.
thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thanks everyone for the great questions.
Dr. Rob Thacker here every single Tuesday. Thanks to everybody who picked up the phone, dialed the numbers, and joined the show. You make my day each and every day you do it. Have a fantastic day, everyone, and remember, be kind to one another.